Hey class, how's it going? Today we're going to be talking about mass communication, propaganda, and persuasion. Ooh, super exciting. When it comes to the media, it affects a lot of what we do and how we think. If you think of the recent coronavirus situation, we're getting a lot of our information about how to react from the media, whether it's the news media or social media. So, when we're talking about social psychology and we're talking about how these things affect our behavior, right? How society affects our behavior, really understanding the role of media in very large or very small ways on our behavior is very important. So I just want you to think for a second, what is the purpose of the media? Whether we're talking about news media or social media, why does it exist? Why does it still exist? What was the origin of it? Why do we continue to depend on it? What purpose does it serve in our lives? Think about it. I'll wait. Take your time. Oh yeah, that's good. That's a good thought right there. That second one, though, you're close. You're close. That's it. That's what I'm looking for. There we go. We got it. I always knew you'd get it. Always believed in you. Now, before we talk about media, I want to talk about persuasion. Persuasion is changing people's behavior, attitudes, opinions, right? So, for example, I, the other day, persuaded you to do a homework assignment, right? I communicated something to you, and although you might not have normally done that assignment, you decided to take time out of your schedule to do that thing. So I persuaded you. Why was I able to do that? Well, I have authority, right? I'm dangling something over you that you want. You want to do well in this class, or maybe you were just bored and you had a whole bunch of free time and you wanted something that would occupy that time. So, because of that, I was able to persuade you to do something, right? It feels like you did it of your own volition, but there was persuasion there. And that's the power of social psychology. So, persuasion can affect our opinions, attitudes, or behaviors. Opinions are what we believe to be true, but just to be clear, opinions are not always true. Attitudes are opinions that deal with emotional or evaluative components. So the my like favorite soda would be an attitude, right? Oh, I love Pepsi. I don't understand how people could drink Coke, right? That is an attitude. It has an evaluative component to it. And then we also have our behaviors, the things that we actually do. Now, you might have noticed that we get a lot of information constantly, especially now with social media. There are alerts that are occurring all of the time, right? So, for example, when I wake up in the morning, I usually have at least five different news alerts about different video game news, different political or economic news. If there's some change in the tax code, I hear about it, right? In addition, in my personal social network on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook. There's a notification. Just literally, I hope you heard that. My phone just rang as I'm trying to, or buzzed, bing, boomed, bing, bang, boom, bang, bang, bang. I don't know how to describe the dinged. I don't know what sounds do phones make. As I'm trying to focus on doing this lecture, I'm being distracted by the media, right? It could be any number of things. I'm actually just gonna check while we're here to see what. Oh, somebody just responded to a comment on my post. Right, I'm currently in a big old thread about accounting, and because of that, because I'm talking about this accounting news, it's distracting me from other stuff. Right. The fact that there's so much to deal with also makes us much more forgetful. If you only have 10 things to focus on in a specific day, life is pretty easy. But if you have to focus on 20, 30, 40, 50 things, right? You're keeping track of different groups that you are a part of. You have your family text thread. One group of friends has a text thread. You're also on a group me. You're also doing Marco Polo. Somebody tags you in something on Instagram. Somebody ats you on Twitter. Your favorite TikTok celebrity just posted a new video while your friend is on Instagram Live and they invite you, right? It makes it much more likely that you're going to forget things. The other aspect, which is a bit controversial, is the idea of social skill deficits. Does social media make us less able to socialize properly? Well, one question is, what is proper socialization, right? So if I respond to somebody with a full sentence, or if I respond to somebody with LOL and a bunch of emojis, right? Is there any difference in the quality of the communication? One could argue that communication changes over time, right? 10, 15 years ago, if you did not end a sentence with a period, then you were it was wild, right? What's wrong with you for not ending a sentence with a period? But now, ending a sentence with a period makes you seem like very stern and aggressive, right? So if I say, hey, in a text message versus hey period, somebody is going to assume that I'm mad at them. So one thing to think about is how media affects our social skills, but also what we expect from people when it comes to socializing. There are also different contexts for socializing, so it's a thing to think about. So obviously, there are lots of things that can take our attention. We probably don't even think about them, but uh, if you are able to, just like look through all the apps on your phone. Do you have any notifications that you haven't read yet? Right? We're constantly being flooded with information, and the information can be for entertainment, it could be for education, but we're constantly being flooded with things. And going back to persuasion, right? They're convincing us to engage in a specific action, which is to watch or view or read, right? To engage. And one thing about like social media, if you've noticed, these apps will change from time to time. And the reason that they change is to get our attention. So the like you know when it comes to the Facebook feed, I know by saying Facebook that makes me seem like I'm very old, which I am. I'm 56, but Facebook is a thing where it just used to show you everything, right? If somebody posts something, even if it's that like one person who you were friends with in high school, who you talked to like once, it will show you that person's comment that they just made on something, right? Now your Facebook feed is tailored. Certain people that you are friends with, you'll probably never see their post based on the algorithm because the app wants to show you things that you are likely to engage in because that means that you're more likely to stay on the app. The downside of this, aside from the fact that your behavior is being manipulated, is the fact that this app makes it so that you are insulated only by things that you like, right? And so one issue with the current modern media is it is very easy to ignore things that you do not like, right? If some celebrity says something that you like disagree with, like they're like, I think that being vegan is dumb. You can go, well, that person's canceled, right? I never have to watch any show or movie that that person is involved with because I can just unsubscribe or not watch their show anymore because there are a billion other things that I can do with my time. Back in the day, if somebody who you liked had an unpopular opinion, you would just go, well, that's their opinion, but it would be much harder for you to avoid them because there was less taking up your attention. Now, we all watch different news channels, and even if we're not watching like the actual news put on by a like big news channel, we have our own websites that can be very liberal or very conservative or have fringe ideas. It's very easy to be surrounded by our own bubble of information. You don't have to be exposed to opposite opinions if you don't want to be. So one thing I want to talk about is the idea of media contagion, specifically emotional contagion, which is the idea of one person's emotional behaviors triggering similar emotions and behaviors in others who are observing that behavior. Now, this picture, in case it's a little hard to maybe tell what's going on, it is a Snickers bar with a razor blade inside. Now, most of the time when you eat candy, you will notice that it is lacking in razor blades. Actually, for most of you listening, and I'm going to assume 100%, but it could be closer to 97%, none of us have bitten into a piece of candy that has a razor blade in it. We've never gone trick or treating and had marijuana stuffed in our candy. We haven't had any experiences like that. But the media especially during Halloween, latches onto these specific stories. Now, the odds of this happening are extremely low, right? In general, if you get candy from a stranger, which now that I say that sounds like a terrible idea, but if you're going trick or treating in your neighborhood, there aren't people putting razor blades in candy or poisoning things or putting rat poison in like all these stories that you've heard. These happen very rarely. But when the media talks about them and you see these very emotionally stressing images, we get triggered by that and we assume that it can happen to us. Even though statistically it's unlikely to happen, we are more likely to fear it. And this relates to what we were talking about a long time ago, the availability heuristic, because the most poignant idea is this one that sticks out, which is, oh, if I get candy, right, there's going to be a razor blade in it or broken up shards of glass, right? The I also remember a long time ago there was a story about like somebody finding like a whole bunch of cockroach eggs or live cockroaches or something like that, like in their Taco Bell. Which now that I even think about it, I'm like, how? What? What? But for the longest time, people were like, well, I'm not going to go to Taco Bell because I don't want to like bite into my Taco Bell and have like seven cockroaches crawl out my mouth like this happened to this actual person who I'm pretty sure isn't just a made up story, right? But when we hear about things happening to other people, we get triggered by that and we feel the same way. And this is the power of the media, right? Now, when used well, it's great. For example, let's just say hypothetically there was a pandemic, right? And we all needed to, I don't know, change our behaviors in order to make sure that the pandemic doesn't spread. The media would be great for that. But also, it can be used to make us afraid of things that we don't actually need to be afraid about. And if we just trust the media, and take everything at face value, that's problematic. On the other side, there are people who trust nothing from the media. So you might have heard some conspiracies, like hypothetically, if there were a pandemic that and everybody had to social distance, you might hear conspiracies that the purpose of talking about the pandemic was to maybe create martial law so that would be easier to control, or to install 5G cell phone towers for mind control and to cause cancer and to kill people, or so the to it's a Russian or Chinese conspiracy to kill Americans, even though people are dying all around the world. So the power of the media, the mass media, or very like specific forms of media, fringe media groups, is very powerful. Education, propaganda, and fake news. So if you think about education, right, what we choose to discuss and what we choose not to discuss is very important, right? If I want to talk about how America is the greatest country in the world, then I'm going to talk about how we saved the world during World War II, right? How we fought the British and fought for freedom. Yeah, freedom from the Brits. All the great things that America has done. Because, as you know, America has only done great things. Right now, I am looking at an American flag and I am saluting it, and there is a bald eagle on my shoulder, and I'm also smoking American spirits because America's the greatest country in the world, and it's never done anything wrong. I mean, there was Vietnam and the Korean War and Operation Iraqi Freedom, and one could probably argue Desert Storm, and there was Japanese internment, but we've never done anything like that again, aside from recently. If you remember, we've separated children from their parents and are still having a very hard time getting them reunited. And Flint doesn't have clean water. So what we choose to focus on and what we choose to highlight is going to affect perception. So the information that we choose to present when it comes to education, when it comes to the media, is going to affect people's behavior. If you think about propaganda, usually when we're talking about propaganda, it's government propaganda, uh, is used to make people feel a certain way, right? Uh, so I've provided some examples of various war propaganda from a variety of countries, which are changing people's behavior, right? So, for example, I want you for the U.S. Army, right? The idea that it's noble to fight for the country. It's not just, there are certain people who go out and fight. Anyone can be somebody who serves in the military, right? Or this ad from Great Britain, which is the idea of changing over to a victory job, right? A job that serves the military is the best type of job. Or even this ad from Australia, the idea that there are soldiers who are coming to take away your freedom, and in order to protect your freedom, you have to fight against them. Or this really fun German poster from the early 20th century. I don't remember what was going on in Germany in the early 20th century, but you see this man who, I'm assuming because he has a Star of David, is being portrayed as a Jew. And apparently the Germans did not like Jewish people at that time. That's a thing that I'm learning right now. But as you can see, right, this man is being painted as a threat. So all of these are specific types of propaganda. The biggest issue that we deal with aren't posters that you see posted as posters are. They get posted. That is literally in the name. That seems so redundant to say. I apologize. But it's the idea of what is fake news and what is real news, right? In any story, there are a variety of interpretations of that behavior. So I think a relevant one is the idea of stop and frisk. Now, if you're not familiar with stop and frisk, it was a program in New York where the idea was that police officers, without a warrant, if they saw somebody who could be committing a crime, they could stop them and frisk them to make sure that they didn't have weapons or drugs or pirated movies. So the and if you think about it from one perspective, right, it's a really great idea. Because sometimes you hear about these people who get away, right, on a technicality, right? You know they did the crime. You know they did the crime. You know they did it, but because of this corrupt law system, they're able to pay some lawyer to get out of it, right? Because even though the police officer saw them carry a kilo of cocaine into their house, they didn't have a proper warrant when they made the arrest, so it had to be thrown out, right? Darn it. So stop and frisk actually allows police officers to do their job. On the other hand, right, uh, who are the people who are being targeted by stop and frisk? It's not Wall Street executives. It's going to be people who are lower income and probably people of color, people who are already targeted by mistreatment from the police. So, on one hand, right, stop and frisk seems like a very good idea. On another hand, stop and frisk seems like a terrible idea. So if I have a politician who I support who supported stop and frisk, then I'm going to point out how they care so much about the safety of their community. If there's somebody who I oppose who supported stop and frisk, I'm just going to call them a racist. And to be fair, they probably are a little bit racist. But just kidding. Republicans and Democrats both supported stop and frisk, right? So the our interpretation and our presentation of information affects how other people respond to that information. So when we're talking about persuasion, there are two ways that you can be persuaded. One is the central route. It's slow and methodical. So let's say your parents, when you were 15, sat you down and they're like, "Hey, you're growing up. I know that you've been dating," and they have like a hour-long conversation with you about safe sex and abstinence and STIs and pregnancy, and they talk about condoms, right? That is the central route. The peripheral route is your parents saying, if you have sex, you're going to get pregnant. And you're like, Mom, I'm a dude. And like, I don't care. You're going to get pregnant and you're going to get herpes and you're going to die because your dick is going to fall off, right? That would be the peripheral route. It's quick and dirty. So if you think about like movie trailers, right? It's not a long 3 to 4 page review of the movie that tells you why it's a cinematic masterpiece. It's, attractive person here, explosion, right? A mysterious voice, something like that, something that's quick and gets your attention. So a lot of the media forms of persuasion use the peripheral route, right? If you think about anti-smoking ads, they're very quick and dirty. So I remember when I was in high school, there was just a picture of lungs of a smoker versus lungs of a person who did not smoke or rarely smoked, and you see the difference, and you're like, "Ugh, I don't want that to happen to my lungs." That's the peripheral route. Now, going through like what nicotine is and its various effects on your brain and your body, and also the negative, not the chemicals in cigarettes and how they can affect you in a variety of ways, and what can happen in the short term versus the long term. That's the central route. So when you're trying to persuade people, be aware of what route you're using. So credibility is a big thing. We decide based off our own circumstances who is credible and who's not. So I'm sharing now a little thing that has been making the rounds about the internets and the Facebooks. And you might have seen this, you might not have, but essentially what it is saying is that there are some Japanese doctors who've been treating COVID-19, and this is their advice for how to avoid the disease. Now, there are a lot of things at play, right? For example, a lot of people in America don't trust Western medicine. So anything that sounds Western is automatically in their minds not trustworthy, with good reason, right? We know that there's a lot of money behind them, and so sometimes we overprescribe drugs when they're not necessary, but that doesn't mean that all drug prescriptions and all Western medicine is bad. You just need to know what's good and what's bad. But because of that, we're more likely to trust something that comes from some other country than something that comes from America. Certain people are less likely to trust American doctors than other doctors. So that's one thing. So there's also the fact that they use information that we know to be true, right? Stomach acid does kill viruses. That is not an that's a factual statement. So the idea that you can wash the virus into your stomach, that technically does work, right? If you have germs in your mouth and they go into your stomach where there's stomach acid, they will die. The thing that it ignores is that your there are other ways for the virus to get into your body or bloodstream, right? So if you rub your eyes, if it gets into your nose or your sinuses, right? If you breathe it into your lungs, it cannot be dissolved in the stomach acid. But we don't focus on that. We immediately go, well, this doctor said it, and it's not a Western doctor, it's a Japanese doctor, so I can trust him. And okay, well, water is good. I know that drinking water is good, so drinking more water can't be bad for me. And it it does work. Acid does kill viruses and bacteria. That's part of the reason why our stomach is so acidic. It also helps break down food for digestion, but it also helps get rid of germs that could make us pretty miserable. So that's another thing that happens to be true. So we really have to be aware of the fact that just because things seem credible doesn't mean that they are. Something that I've mentioned before is that almost every article that says a study at Harvard or a study at Yale um, is probably a like wrong. That's the worst way to say it. Studies that begin with like, oh, a recent study at Harvard, or a Harvard professor, or a Yale professor, or researchers at Yale are often using that idea that by default we hear those names and we consider them factual and credible, and we just ignore any other information that we hear. It disarms us and it allows us to be vulnerable to non credible information. So, depending on your age, you're more likely to recognize one of these people versus the other. One thing that allows us to be persuaded is the idea of attractiveness and similarity. So, people who are more attractive are more likely to persuade us to do something. If you've ever been hit on, then you know how this works. Something about attractive people makes you want to do things for them and with them, right? That is why when you look at advertisements, they use attractive people in order to sell a certain product, right? Once you see somebody who's attractive, that's where the idea of sex sells comes from. Attractive people are very good at selling products. The other idea is similarity. People who we feel are similar to us, right, are more convincing because we're like, if this person does it and this person is very similar to me, then I too want to do that thing, right? So the first picture, the top picture, is a kid called Mikey, and there was a commercial back in the day that I never saw because I'm 26, and but my parents talked about it all the time, and it was a commercial for Life cereal, and the whole idea was Mikey was a very picky eater, but then he tried Life cereal, and all the kids flipped out, and they're like, "What? He likes it! He likes it!" Right? So the idea is if you were a picky eater as a child and you're like, well, I'm very picky about my cereal. But you see this commercial and you're like, well, if Mikey didn't eat anything and now he liked Life cereal, well, I'm going to ask my parents to buy me Life cereal. The second person is Kim Kardashian, right? In addition to the fact that many people consider her very attractive, many people consider themselves similar to her. And that is why she's become such a popular influencer in culture because people idolize her and find her attractive. So you will buy whatever makeup or lipstick or clothing line she is selling because you want to be like her or you already perceive yourself to be like her. So when it comes to communication, there are three main pathways that we go through. Uh, One is the emotional appeal, which is called pathos. There's the logical appeal, logos, and then there's the ethical appeal, ethos. And the depending on how we're co- uh, communicating with someone, we might use one of these three, or we might use multiple, right? So maybe I am real disappointed um, because I want you guys to do your homework, and you guys just haven't been doing your homework, right? So I could do an appeal to your emotions and I might say, maybe I try to intimidate you, and I say, if you want to pass this class, right, you got to do your homework. Maybe I intimidate you with that fear of not passing, or maybe I say, hey guys, you know, it really like breaks my heart to see that you guys aren't taking this class seriously. You know, I've been struggling a lot. My mom's sick, and you know, I put my heart and soul into making these homework assignments and giving you guys feedback, and the fact that you guys don't take it seriously just really breaks my heart, right? Those are appeals to your emotions. My mom's fine, by the way. The Or I might appeal to your logic, right? So you want to pass this class. You don't want to come back again next semester. You want to pass this class. So if you want to pass this class, you have to do the assignments that are graded in order for you to pass this class. It's the only logical decision, right? I can also apply to ethos, which can refer to either the authority or influence that I have, or sometimes the idea of doing the right thing, right? You guys maybe idolize me. You know, you saw that I have 50,000 followers on Facebook, Instagram, whatever. The and you're like, oh, I want to be like Professor Thompson. Sure, I'm sure that's what all of you guys are thinking. And then I say, well, the only reason why I was able to be so successful is because I really studied social psychology. That's really the thing that made me such a great influencer, and it's manipulating that allowed me to be so successful. So because I'm doing it, you want to be like me. So we have emotional appeals, logical appeals, and ethical appeals. In addition, when we're looking at why we do specific things, usually we look to other people to help with those decisions. Again, this is social psychology. So, how does the group, how does society affect our behavior? So, one thing that we can look at it is statistics or personal examples. So, if you are trying to decide between two video games to purchase, right? Or, two different universities to apply to, you might look at certain statistics. So maybe there's a site that you go to and you're comparing these two schools, and 97% of students who go to school A say that they love it. 83% of students who go to school B say that they love it, right? You're going to go to school A because 97% of people said that they love it, right? Now, maybe you aren't looking at those statistics, but you're at a party and somebody's like, yeah, I went to school B and like I was just miserable. It was the biggest waste of my time and the biggest waste of my money. Like, I basically just tossed that degree in the trash because it was just a wait it was just a big old waste of time. You hear that, and you know that there must be a whole bunch of people who went to that school and made something out of it, but for some reason hearing that one personal example really sticks in your mind, right? So statistics and personal examples can affect our behavior and how we make decisions. Also identity, right? If you hear that a specific school is a party school, or if you hear that a lot of the people who go to a specific school play video games or love sports or whatever it is, right? Whatever thing you identify with, then you're more likely to decide to go to that school. We make decisions based off of how we identify and how other people identify and our relationship to that identity. One last thing is presenting one sided versus two sided arguments. So let's say I'm trying to convince you of something. I want to convince you that, I don't know, uh, alcohol is real delicious, right? And the only way to drink alcohol is don't drink wine, don't drink beer, only drink spirits neat, right? No ice, no mixers. That's the only way to do it. Now, if you've never had alcohol before, right, and you have no opinion on alcohol, me presenting that one sided argument is going to affect your beliefs, right? If this is the first experience you've had hearing about alcohol and how to deal with it, a one sided argument is the best thing for you because you're going to get attached to that one side of the argument. Now, let's say you've been drinking for a while, right? You've had mixed drinks, you drink beer, you drink wine, right? You've had a great experience with different forms of alcohol. You know basically what you like. Me providing a one sided argument is going to be problematic because you're going to immediately get defensive. You're going to say that I'm biased. You're going to say that I don't know what I'm talking about because I'm ignoring the information that you know. So if I'm talking to an educated audience, then I need to address all sides of the argument where I say, look, I know that wine is delicious. I occasionally enjoy a glass myself. And beer is great when you are, hanging out with some friends, watching a sports game, right? It's big, so get drunk too fast. You can sip on it during the night. It gives you something to hold. You can cheers with it. It's so nice. Like there's nothing more fun than just having like a nice can or bottle of beer in your hand. But if you really want to have a classy evening with your friends, right, to show potential employers that you're a sophisticated individual, to impress a date on a date night, to show them that you're fancy and you know what's what, you really want to go with a standard unmixed spirit. Vodka, scotch, right? Those types of things show that level of sophistication. Now, it's not necessarily true, and you might disagree, but the fact that you know about other drinks and ways of drinking things, and the fact that I've acknowledged that makes you more likely to hear what I'm saying because I'm not ignoring information that you know. So, those few things are very important to be aware of when we're talking about communication. So, we depend on statistics, right? How many other people have done a specific thing, but we also are likely to rely on personal examples, especially strong negative ones. Those really stick in our minds. Identity, right? How much do the people who are communicating to us remind us of ourselves? And if we're ignorant about something, a one sided argument is more likely to convince us. But when we're more educated on a topic, then we really want to hear a two sided argument where both sides, pro and against, are discussed. Usually I have a really cool image or something, but I got lazy with this slide and forgot to fix it before I uploaded it. So just realize that I'm human, just like you. Just like you. Now, I could have fixed this and you wouldn't have noticed it, but I just want you guys to know that I am sometimes human. Now, when we're looking at what makes somebody more likely to be convinced, we want to look at personality and politics, right? So some people are more willing to listen to opposing opinions. They're more willing to assume that they might be wrong, right? Uh, there are other people who are more bullheaded, and even if they are wrong, they won't ever concede and say that they are. So our personality makes a big difference when it comes to how likely we are to be persuaded. In addition, our politics, right? If something is being said that is within the realm of what we already believe, then we're more likely to agree or we're more likely to agree with that thing. So, for example, the recent stimulus payment, which is a form of social it's a social program. It's a form of socialism, right? So the idea of taking government money and distributing it to people, uh, if you already were for the idea of a basic minimum income or for some sort of redistribution of wealth, then you would be like, yeah, this stimulus check is a great idea because it matches your politics. If you think that the government should never intervene in anything, then you hear something like that and you're like, this is the worst idea ever. So new information is funneled through our own politics. Also, mood and mindset, right? If you are hungry and angry, that is a worse time to try to be presented with new information. You have to be receptive. If you're tired, you don't want to be presented with new information because change cognitively is very difficult. Our brains don't like changing our minds. That's why we have the sunk cost fallacy. We don't Once we've already done something, we don't want to change, right? We have that momentum, so we'd rather keep on doing the thing that we have been doing instead of trying some new thing. Okay, I need you to pause right now for 10 seconds. So, right now, pause the video. This is very important. Now, I'm going to assume that some of you did not do that, or some of you did it and wondered what would happen if I didn't do it, right? And we'll talk about that. Next slide. We have the ability to resist propaganda and resist persuasion. There's an idea called reactance, which is the idea that when our sense of freedom is threatened, we attempt to restore it, right? So when you are in class, whether it's a 2 hour or 3 hour class, you sit the entire time, right? You don't think about it, but you do it. Now, once I ask you to sit, so if at the beginning of class I say, hey guys, super important, don't want to be a jerk about this, but you have to remain seated the entire class, right? What might happen in your brain is a little bit of reactance where you go, I don't want to stay seated, right? Who's this person to tell me that I should stay seated? For some reason, once we're told to do something, it becomes much harder for us to do it, right? Because we want to feel like we have agency in our own lives. So reactance is one way of one way that we resist being persuaded. The other thing is the what's called the inoculation effect, where if you're able to refute a smaller version of an argument, you're more likely to refute the full argument later, right? So one example of this, and for you philosophy nerds, this is an example of a straw man fallacy, which is a popular refutation of evolution, right? If humans evolved from monkeys, then why are there still monkeys around, right? That's not how evolution works. So that's pretty dumb that obviously if we evolved from them, then there shouldn't be any around. So it can't be true. Now, this is the thing. If you hear that and you don't understand evolution, then you go, oh, actually, that makes perfect sense. Evolution is pretty dumb. People came from monkeys. Oh my gosh. But this is the thing. That is not actually what evolution is. Now, we did evolve from apes and primates, but our path was different than other ones. But if you already believe this anti-evolution belief, even if it's just a small aspect of what evolution actually is, you're much more likely to reject a much more thought out definition of evolution later, because you are already committed to this belief of not believing in evolution. So this is really great for preventing conspiracy theories, because if I tell you something like COVID-19 is a virus that has always existed. It just recently mutated. And this is us just dealing with a new, more dangerous mutation of an already existing virus. Then if you hear, well, Russia invented COVID-19 to kill Americans and take over our democracy and make China in charge of the America, right? Then you hear that and you're like, well, that's not true, because I'm inoculated against that. I'm protected against that information because I already understand that information. So it can be used for the good, right? But it can also be used for the negative. It makes us more likely to commit to problematic beliefs. So that is all I want you to think about for now. I hope you guys are doing well. Make sure to wash your hands, and that's it. That's it. That's all from old Jeff. I'm gonna go and wash my hands. Take care. Bye.